What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here. Back again talking college basketball. It is March the 15th. It is Championship Saturday. A lot of conferences do have their seasons come down to today. Couple still in the semifinals, Big Ten, Ivy League, a few others. We're going to get into everything you need to know. We had a lot of growth yesterday. A lot of you actually subscribed to the channel, left comments, liked the video. If you do that, thank you. It helps a ton. If any of you are willing to take the time out of your day today, if you enjoyed this content, even if you just watch for any length of time, whether it's one team or the whole video, it does help a lot. And I thank you so much as we head into March Madness. We're getting there. The channel's growing and we couldn't do it without you guys. But let's dive right in. Up at the top, we have Tennessee taking on Auburn. This is a 4.5-point spread in favor of Auburn, and the total in the game is at 140 points. There are no major injuries in the game. Yesterday, we saw Tennessee knock off a red-hot Texas, 83-72, to get their SEC tournament started. And Auburn beat Ole Miss in a really ugly game, 62-57, a really poor shooting game. Ole Miss was atrocious from three. Auburn wasn't that much better. And these teams did, these teams did play in the regular season. Auburn beat Tennessee 53-51. That was on January 25th. Auburn played at home. Neither team shot over 40% from the floor. Neither team shot over 18% from three. Auburn did out-rebound Tennessee by 5, but this was a really even game across the board. It just was a poor shooting game. And you could frame that a different way and say it was an elite defensive game, which is where I tend to lean, having seen that contest. Tennessee is 6-5 against the top 25. Some of these SEC records, if you watch yesterday's video, you'll be like, oh, Auburn was 7-4 against the top 25. How did they get to 10-4? Ole Miss jumped back into the top 25 in efficiency metrics, so that's how you get a change like that. But anyway, Tennessee 6-5. They've beaten Louisville, Illinois, Florida, Missouri, Texas A&M, Alabama, an elite resume. Only one loss outside the top 25 came to Vandy. A normal year, that might be the best resume in the country. It's just that Auburn's on the other side of this game, 10-4 against the top 25, wins over Houston, Iowa State, Tennessee, Bama. Their only losses are in the top 25, and Texas A&M at 20 is their worst loss. Their other ones are against Duke, Florida, and Alabama. Those are all top 6 teams. This is the best resume in the country. These teams have a lot of comparable metrics. Starting with height, Auburn 75th, 35th in rebounding. Tennessee 51st in height, 20th in rebounding. Both teams are top 43 in the offensive glass. Both teams hammered the boards in the first game. And that's partially just because they were missing so many shots, but you get nearly 80 combined rebounds, 79 total, 42 for Auburn, 37 for Tennessee. Hopefully my math checks out there. But yeah, overall, if you just look at both of these teams, the shooting does lag behind for Tennessee. They do play a little bit better defense overall, so perhaps that's what even this out a little bit, but they're 88th in effective field goal percentage, 84th in 2-point, 131st in 3-point, extremely reliant on the North Florida transfer. Chaz Lanier hitting 40% of his threes, had an excellent game yesterday. But Auburn's still 5th in 3-point defense. They're 37th on the interior, 12th overall. But when you look at Auburn, I think Tennessee still can neutralize some of their better shooting metrics. Auburn comes in 23rd, effective field goal, 29th in 2, 34th in 3. And I've been really disappointed with this team. The last week they've played, week and a half, 3 losses, no shame in any of them really, or 2 losses, and then the really close game against Ole Miss. But there's no shame in those. But still, as you can tell, I've lost some money in some of those Auburn contests. When they're playing at full strength, which you could poke a hole in, Jones was hurt last week. Janai's been hurt all year playing through it. And Baker Mazar's been on the injury report a few times. When they're at full health, it's just how do you defend this team? You have Broom inside. His efficiency is elite, obviously a player of the year candidate. Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, Chad Baker Mazar, and Tahad Pettiford all hit 39% of their threes. How do you defend that? Well, Tennessee did have the answer in the first game, and they have the 3rd overall defense. They're the first number 1 total defense defending the perimeter and 17th inside. So they do have the answers. Where Tennessee can lag behind is offensively. In the periphery, there's not too much to note. This didn't really have a big effect in the first game. It was close, turnovers, fouls. All that projects to be relatively close in this game. Mathematically, we do make this pretty close to the spread. we would actually have this in favor of Tennessee slightly, 68.2 to 72.1. That's about a minus 3.9 for Auburn. Stylistically, I think Auburn has more ways to win and more ways to run away with games like this. Even though Tennessee is going to slow it down, they're going to be aggressive and they're going to try to beat you on the glass, beat you defensively. That has given Auburn trouble, at least in the first game they played. But this Auburn team, in my opinion, is still the most talented team in the entire country. They're not a team that I'm particularly keen to fade. I didn't yesterday and it cost me. So right now we're just going to leave this as a lean. But it's still very early in the day on that. We're recording this early in the morning on Saturday morning. The games, most of them ended only a few hours ago. So like most things, I think the model is amazing as a baseline, but you need to add some context. We don't have as much context as we normally do heading into a slate. So we'll be evaluating games throughout the day, adding a lot to Discord. There were plenty we added yesterday, and we'll do the same today. And this could be on the list. I think if you want to play Auburn, they are taking money. The time is probably now. We will probably play this, or at least debate playing this soon after the stream ends. Wisconsin takes on Michigan State in the Big Ten semifinal. This game has a 3.5-point spread in favor of Sparty. It's a 144.5 total. No major injuries in this game. Wisconsin recently returned Max Klesmit and Nolan Winter. Wisconsin beat Northwestern and UCLA to get here. They absolutely ravaged UCLA yesterday. Michigan State had a double bye, so they've only played once, but they beat Oregon pretty soundly, 74-63 in their debut. These teams played back earlier this year on March 2nd, with Michigan State winning 71-62. Max Klesmit didn't play in that game, and if you remember, this was the worst shooting performance from Wisconsin all year, and it was historically bad. 15.5% from three. Michigan State improved to 33%. There were some peripheral stats that did favor Michigan State as well, so it wasn't just the shooting for Wisconsin that did them in. They lost on the glass 51-40. Rest of the peripheral stats were pretty even. Resume-wise, Michigan has gone out ahead of Wisconsin at this point. Wisconsin's 3-4 against the top 25, beat Arizona, Purdue, and Illinois. 4 losses outside the top 25, Michigan, Marquette, Oregon, and Penn State. The only one that's damning is the Penn State loss in the season finale. Michigan State has squashed every sort of criticism you could have brought forth on the resume. They're 5-2 against the top 25, beat Illinois twice, beat Purdue, Maryland, and Wisconsin already this year. There are losses that you'd poke holes in. Memphis, USC, and Indiana, 2 of those outside the top 50. Mostly earlier in the year, though, they have played well of late. There are some reasons for that. Height-wise, both these teams are tall. Michigan State's a little taller, 21-34. They're also better on the glass, second in the country in total rebounding. Wisconsin 64th. That played out in the first game. 11 rebounds ahead of Wisconsin was Michigan State. Offensively, Wisconsin's the much better shooting team, but they're also playing into the better defense. So this is similar to the first matchup. You have the 53rd ranked effective field goal percentage, 34th from 2, 118th from 3, which they need some better shooting out of Blackwell and Klesmit. They've shot the second and third most three-point attempts, but both of them have regressed significantly since last year. Klesmit's below 30% from 3. And Tanji's fine. He's hitting at least 37% of his threes. The forwards are actually spacing the floor better than you'd think, with Crowell and Winter above 37%. And then Kamari McGee is shooting 50% from 3. That dropped a little bit since he took over for Klesmit during that injury. That role has gone back towards Klesmit. But off the bench, that's a good option. Michigan State, though, 5th in total defense, 2nd defending the 3, 97th inside. Severely hindered Wisconsin in game 1. Some of that forced, some of it was Wisconsin just missing open shots. I think it lands somewhere in the middle. Michigan State, a lot will be talked about their three-point shooting, 328th, 146 in effective field goal. They're actually good at getting to the rim. But Wisconsin, the place you want to beat them is the perimeter. They're 55th on the interior defense, 142nd from the perimeter. But Michigan State has regressed positively from 3. I think that's just because they're playing Jace Richardson more. He's a 39% three-point shooter. He's a freshman, so I mean, I'm not surprised Izzo played him a little bit less to begin the year. He's playing him more now. If you want to poke a hole in the efficiency metrics and isolate Michigan State for recent play, I think you could. If you do that, they would be favored by a little bit more than 1.4, which is where we have it. 72 points for Wisconsin, 73.4 for Michigan State. You'd get that closer to 2, but it's still a gap that's not quite as wide as the spread's making it. This is one we show a lot of value on. I've hesitated earlier this morning just because this opened a little bit closer to the efficient spread. I believe it was 1.5 to open, went to 2.5 when I went to bed. And then at that time, we were sitting right on the efficient number, or right just past the efficient number. Some of these 3.5s are juice to Michigan State. I plan to take a Wisconsin side, but there's no incentive to do this right now. With Michigan State taking so much money throughout the early portion of the day, you're probably going to get a 4 at some point. Doesn't make me feel good. Michigan State's playing elite basketball right now, but that's where we will land. Before we move on, if you or somebody who knows a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 or older to play in most areas. The Ivy League finally makes its return. They've been off for over a week. Princeton takes on Yale. This is the semifinal. Only 4 teams make the Ivy League conference tournament out of their 8. So Princeton, Yale in the first game. Dartmouth takes on Cornell in the second one. This one's a lot more interesting from a betting perspective. There's no major injuries in any of the games. Yale's a 7.5-point favorite over Princeton, a 145.5 total. Been a very disappointing year for Princeton, who was the preseason favorite to win the conference. They have a lot of talent, but this is a Kansas State, Cincinnati, Arizona State, Dayton situation where if you like Princeton, you're banking on them finally playing to their potential and what could be their final game of the year. That's generally been a pretty bad approach. I nearly tried to do it with Dayton yesterday and they lost. But anyway, in this game, Yale already beat them twice. They beat Princeton on the road 77-70. They outshot Princeton, out-rebounded them by 4, and they overcame 17 turnovers. They won by 7 points with 17 turnovers. They largely did it through defense and just excellent shooting. You're going to get that with Yale. And then in the second game, they absolutely annihilated Princeton, 84-57. Crushed them just in every shooting metric. They out-rebounded them 40-31. They cleaned up all of those turnovers from the first game, and they only had 8. Just massive resume boosts for Yale. Overall, in top 200 games, Princeton 6-8. They beat St. Joseph and Rutgers, and Akron, actually, who we'll talk about later. But they also have the lows, lost to Wright State at 223 and Brown at 209. Yale is 6-4 against the top 200, also beat Akron at 99. They did play Purdue and Minnesota to single digits as well. And then they only have 1 loss that came by more than 10 points all season. 2 losses outside the top 200 as well, Harvard and Delaware. These teams are basically identical in effective height, but rebounding vastly favors Yale, 11-200. We saw that in both of the first games, and especially the second one. Yale's also an excellent shooting team. 15th in three-point percentage. They don't take a ton of threes, but John Poulikitis is the only player with over 100 attempts, 40% for him. Bez and Bong, he's hitting a lot of good threes as well, but they can score inside, 91st overall despite not being very tall. And maybe people will compare this Yale team to last year. If they do make the tournament, I think the biggest difference is they are much smaller, and despite being able to score inside, I think that's largely competition, whereas last year you had Danny Wolf, a 7-footer. You could see avenues to them scoring inside against better teams in the actual tournament. This year, I'm not sure if they have that. Then, defensively, Princeton 203 total defense, 278 inside, 300 in second perimeter. Yale should meet no resistance in this game. On the other side, Princeton definitely not playing up to expectation. They're 131 in effective field goal, 221 inside, 79th from 3. They do shoot the 17th most threes in the country, behind Blake Peters at 40%, Xavier Lee, 37.5. Yale's excellent on defense, but if they do trail anywhere is three-point defense. They're 173rd. So I think the path for Princeton, if they are going to pull this upset, is just shooting a ton of threes and hitting more than expectation. On the perimeter, I guess on the periphery, neither team really turns the ball over often. Fouls don't project to be a major factor, which makes that first outcome with Yale turning it over double-digit times, 17 times, very weird. Mathematically, we make this pretty far outside the projected spread, nearly 10 points. I played a Yale minus 7.5. I'm not sure which way this spread is going to go, but I think you have some wiggle room, even if it moves towards Yale like a half point or something. I'm not, or I guess I should say towards Princeton a half point or something. I'm not really worried about this game. This is one I think you have a little bit of room for error, and we'll play the Bulldogs over Princeton. And this is I wish these teams weren't playing in the semifinal. These are the two best teams, in my opinion. I don't want Dartmouth or Cornell to make the NCAA tournament or even have that chance. The better chance for an upset's coming from this game. Alabama takes on Florida, second SEC clash. This game has a 3.5-point spread in favor of Florida, 174 total. Latrell Wrightsell's injured for Alabama. No surprise there. He's got an ACL. Alabama just beat Kentucky yesterday, 99-70. Florida demolished Missouri, 95-81. Neither game particularly close. These teams played in the regular season, and Florida won 99-94. Awesome shooting game. Both teams above average. Alabama 36% from three. Florida crushed Alabama at the rim, 60% from two. Florida crushed Alabama on the glass, 50-39. Both teams had over 20 fouls. Crazy foul fest in that game. Resume-wise, Florida 6-3 against the top 25, wins over Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, and Missouri. They have only a couple losses that are noteworthy, I guess. The worst loss this team has is to Georgia at 35. Otherwise, their losses are in the top 25. This is a great body of work for Florida. Although they're not tested as much as Bama, whose schedule is super rigorously in the non-con. They're 7-5 against the top 25. Wins over Houston, Illinois, Texas A&M, Kentucky twice, Auburn. Only one loss outside the top 25 for them as well, and it came to Oregon and Vegas. Just a phenomenal body of work for both of these teams. And you have a situation where I think Florida has the advantage inside. Alabama has the advantage from three, if you want to just break this down simply. Florida is not the taller team on paper, but the hole you poke there is they haven't had Micah Handlockton all year. Condon's missed a little bit of time for this team. And now you just have all four of your wagons on the interior healthy. So fouls don't matter. Any of them can foul, and it doesn't matter. You just pull one off the bench. Handlockton is one of the best rebounders in the country. Condon and Howe are complete players. Chenyolu is awesome as well for a rotational player, even though sometimes he starts. They have the advantage over Bama total rebounding, and Bama's still limited inside. We talk about this. They did get Darion Reed back, but I'm not sure that matters. When you play Cliff Amorti, you're awesome on defense. Your rim protection is fantastic. Cliff Amorti can't score unless he's dunking the ball. Conversely, when you're playing Diabate, he can't protect the rim, but he's a dynamic scorer. But you're just giving up points inside, hemorrhaging points inside when he's on the floor. And that's how you get Bama trailing on defense. They're 89th in two-point defense, 17th defending the three. The only place this defense lags, well, I suppose they're not great at turnovers forced either. Florida should have a pretty good turnover game. But at least in the half court, this interior defense is a problem against Florida. Conversely, Florida actually, you know what? Florida has the better three-point percentage on paper, 97-108. But if you look at recent play, Alabama has regressed positively since conference. They're back basically at the top 30 now, shooting over 37%. Sears has been awesome. Youngblood's been solid from three. The problem is Florida's defense is complete across the board. They're the better defense. They're 10th defending the interior. That should surprise no one given their personnel. And then their guards, Walter Clayton, Richard, and Martin. This is a top 10 defense defending the three. From there, they force more turnovers than Alabama by a wide margin, nearly 200 ranks ahead of them. Alabama is 100 spots behind Florida in turnovers committed. So that favors Florida. Fouls, I don't think it's really going to be an issue on either side. Both teams are pretty deep. But man, it's very hard for me to play something against Florida, given all the stylistic advantages we just mentioned. But honestly, this might just be Alabama's played a brutal schedule. Are we reading too much into this? Because they do have the guards to match up with Florida. I'm not sure their interior is quite as strong. But mathematically, we make this basically about 2.6 points in favor of Florida. It's just coming in as a lean for me because, man, this Florida team is awesome. I think they have a chance to absolutely roll Alabama from the interior with all their studs inside. But at the same time, we've seen Florida play a couple sleepy games this year, games that I don't have an explanation for. The main one being that Tennessee game where we saw Tennessee didn't have Ziegler or Milicic, and Florida scored 44 points in that game. The second one was against Georgia, and it was basically just one half of basketball. They climbed all the way back in that game, and if it weren't for a few missed free throws at the end, they would have beat Georgia, although they did put themselves in position to lose. So that's giving me pause. Alabama just being awesome and playing a rigorous schedule is giving me pause. We side with Bama mathematically. I tend to lean Florida's direction stylistically, which leads us to a pass for now. Michigan takes on Maryland. This game has a 4-point spread in favor of the Terps. 150.5 total. No major injuries, just players pretty deep in the rotation for both teams. Michigan just beat Purdue to get here, sort of righted the ship after everyone wrote them off. They had lost 4 of their last 6 games. People apparently didn't look at who the opponents were. Every single one of those teams is in the top 25. The real concern you would have poked there is their 2 wins in that span were by 5 points against Nebraska and Rutgers. But anyway, a talented Michigan team was a buy low yesterday. We would have been on the Purdue side, but hesitated, so saved myself some money there. And then to get here, Maryland just annihilated Illinois in the last game. In the regular season, Maryland won on the road, 71-65. Neither team shot the ball particularly well, but Michigan did one on the glass. It was 39-37, so very close. The big difference, as it can be the case in a lot of Michigan games, Maryland forced 16 turnovers and 18 fouls. That gave Maryland the win. On the season, Maryland is 3-2 against the top 25. They've beaten Illinois twice and Wisconsin. They have 5 losses outside the top 25, some more respectable than others. Really just Washington being the damning loss. They beat Marquette, who's 28, or they lost to Marquette at 28, lost to Oregon at 31. Those are pretty respectable. Michigan's 3-5 against the top 25, beating Wisconsin and Purdue twice. They have 4 losses outside the top 35. Wake Forest, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Minnesota. We mentioned some of the holes you could poke in them recently. It's nice that they righted the ship against Purdue. I will say Purdue is sort of uniquely composed to lose games like that. They're horrible defending the interior. Horrible. And Trey Kaufman-Renn, for as good as he's been offensively, is an absolute sieve inside. You line that up against the Twin Towers, Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf, the 7-footers. That played out twice now, so I'm not super surprised. As far as this game goes, you have a Maryland team that defends the rim a lot better than Purdue, so that's the first place you should look. You have Derek Queen. You have Julian Reese. This team is 50th in interior defense, whereas Purdue was outside the top 300. So immediately you should be able to at least limit Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden a little bit more. Michigan's still 7th in interior scoring. So that's worth mentioning. From there, Maryland is 31st in perimeter defense. Michigan's 186th in total three-point percentage on the year. That's dropped outside the top 300 in the last month. If that's too small of a sample, it's still outside the top 200 in conference play, well outside of that. So that lines up as a strong defensive point for Maryland. Their starting 5 guards are as good as anyone's in the country. All 3 of them shoot above 37% from 3. And on the glass, it's not that wide of an advantage. Yeah, Michigan's second in effective height, but Maryland's still 79th. Rebounding is 30-45. It is an advantage for Michigan, but it's not a large one. It's a micro advantage. And then on the other side, scoring at the rim is not going to be easy for Maryland in this matchup, but three-point percentage, they're 34th. Michigan is 75th in three-point defense. They lagged there. And finally, the icing on the cake in this matchup, and what was a huge factor in the first game, turnovers. Maryland's 35th in turnovers committed. They're never turning the ball over. Michigan's 336. They're turning it over all the time. This is the worst number in the Big Ten. Turnovers forced, Maryland's 47th. Michigan's 201st. This is just an enormous mismatch in this game. And one I think that is playable on the Maryland side. Mathematically, we're making this pretty close to efficient. It's not a game I love. But when you actually dive into the stylistics, I think there's a lot of reasons to like Maryland in a spot like this. Not to mention they have the resumes. They have the head-to-head, which would have covered this spread. On the road, too. Likely, we'll end up playing this. This is another one that probably ends up in Discord along with Wisconsin very shortly after the stream. On that quickly, if you're interested in Discord, there's no long-term commitments. It's $10 for a week. It's $30 for a month, which actually lines up pretty well for March Madness, whether you're just looking for bracket stuff for the first week or want content for about the month that the whole tournament runs. That's available to you. What you get, projections for every game, sides, totals, player projections. For March Madness, it'll be for every game. And really almost every game until it starts because we have 2 days left. And that is points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, minutes, everything you could possibly imagine for player projections. We'll have the March Madness tool, demoed that a little bit, projecting every spread and total. ahead of time. So if you want championship games, hypothetically, between Gonzaga and Michigan, I don't think that's likely, but it'll be there. The link's in the description. Arizona takes on Houston. Interesting game. Arizona's a 7-point dog. Total is 135. Juwan Roberts didn't play yesterday for Houston. I don't know if we see him today, maybe just because the title's on the line. And you can hang a banner. I know Kelvin Sampson, he's shooting for a different banner, but hey, Big 12 championships matter. As far as resumes, Arizona to get here has beaten Kansas and Texas Tech. Those are 2 good wins. Houston played Colorado in a bye game, and then they just absolutely slaughtered BYU last night without Roberts. So in the regular season, Houston also, this was a really weird game. I watched this game entirely. Houston wins 62-58. I bet Houston barely got the cover. I was really frustrated watching the game. You had inefficient play on both sides. First off, the reason this game was close in the beginning is because they kept throwing the ball to Juwan Roberts in the paint. He was taking hook shots from the elbow. He went 3 of 11 from 2, and Arizona was getting these long rebounds and able to run in transition. And when they ran in transition, they scored, and they had a lot of success. When Houston started shooting threes and taking more efficient shots at the rim and from 3, the game turned. Then you had to force Caleb Love and Arizona to play in the half court, and instead of an inefficient Juwan Roberts, we saw the inefficient Caleb Love, who ends up 1 of 8 from 3 and plays poor enough to let Houston back in the game and win it. A couple other things that mattered: Arizona out-rebounded Houston 39-30. This was really the first time I saw Vsar play an elevated role and have an impact in the game. More on the defensive end, but limited what Houston could do near the rim, and he was a big reason why Juwan Roberts was so bad in the game. And that might not even matter. You might not have the chance for Juwan Roberts to huck up a bunch of bad shots because he might not play. Anyway, Houston got the win in the previous matchup. Resume-wise, they're the better team overall. 7-3 against the top 25. Wins over BYU twice, Kansas twice, Arizona, Iowa State, Texas Tech. Most of them are in conference. They have dropped games out of conference, it's a little concerning. They lost to San Diego State in overtime on a neutral, lost to Auburn, lost to Bama, lost to Texas Tech in conference. 3 of the 4 came in overtime, so all of them were extremely close. It is hard to poke holes in Houston's resume. Most of their wins and the superior body work has come in conference, and a couple of these teams were not healthy. Iowa State and Texas Tech were walking wounded in those games. And then the losses have largely come in non-con, but they were close. So I don't know what to make of that. Arizona's 5-8 against the top 25, beat Iowa State, BYU, Texas Tech twice. In Kansas, the Iowa State win came basically on a half-court shot. They have 2 losses outside the top 50, West Virginia and Kansas State. So vastly different body of work here. This game largely comes down to health for me and effort. How much is Houston trying? Because they have so many advantages. I guess Arizona is taller, so you could give them the advantage inside. I would give it to them if Juwan is out. But rebounding is 17th to 13th. Houston attacks the offensive glass. Arizona does the same. Those are the offensive rebounding numbers, so you can tell they're both elite there. Total rebounding, it's Arizona 10th, Houston 28th. So close regardless. But with Vsar and Carter Bryant playing elevated roles, I think Arizona's a little stronger inside, mainly just rim protection. But that's no slight to Houston. Juwan Roberts and Tugler might be the best rim protector in the country. I know efficiency metrics would tell you he is. You could make a case for other players like Ryan Kalkbrenner and such, but Tugler's awesome inside. Scoring at the rim should be something that is limited on both sides. From there, who could shoot threes over the top of the opposing defense? The answer is unequivocally Houston. Again, Caleb Love is the only one taking threes for Arizona. He's over 200 attempts. He's at 31% in between there. And on the other side, Houston's second in three-point percentage. Essentially every guard they're trotting on the floor is a 40% three-point shooter. Uzan, Cryer, Sharp, Malik Wilson off the bench. The only one who's struggled a little bit is Arsenault, who's at 36%. But he's been a little banged up too. You could make an excuse for him there. And then between the two defenses, by far the worst unit is Arizona's three-point defense, their perimeter defense, 160th. Houston is 48th defending the three. So the reason we have Arizona listed on the screen is this Juwan Roberts news. Mathematically, this should be within 7 points if Juwan Roberts doesn't play. I don't have that information right now. I'm just telling you right now, it's probably not. This one's going to have to come down to tip because Juwan was a game time decision allegedly yesterday. If he plays, it's going to be a fire on Houston immediately. If Juwan is out, I will strongly consider playing Arizona. This came down to 4 points in the first contest. I think it was largely Houston hurting themselves, but you never know. So we'll pass on this for now and play this later in the day with injury news pending. Big East final, Creighton takes on St. John's. Couple of good games. No major injuries in these contests. Pop Isaacs has been out for a while. Brady Dunlap for St. John's. 6.5-point spread in favor of the home team, a 140.5 total. Creighton just beat DePaul in OT, and everyone was off them. Then they come back and beat UConn in a pretty chippy game. St. John's beats Butler, demolished them. We're down to Marquette early in the game by double digits, end up absolutely slaughtering the Golden Eagles in the second half. And from here, resume-wise, these teams split the regular season. Creighton beat St. John's in the first game by 1. Horrific shooting game from St. John's, but they kept it close because they forced 19 turnovers, and Stephen Ashworth had 10 of them. Creighton did out-rebound them in that game very slightly, though. St. John's took the second game, 79-73. Shot a little better, not that much. They won on the glass this time, 45-42, so it was very close in both games. Creighton turned it over another 15 times in that game, while St. John's only had 5. Creighton also fouled 23 times. The difference was St. John's just shot a little bit better. If St. John's doesn't shoot so poorly in the first game, they win off the 19 turnovers. Creighton's 2-3 against the top 25, beat Kansas in this very St. John's team. Did lose to Georgetown, that's the problem. St. John's has not played a top 25 team all year, with Marquette falling to 28. They did beat them 3 times. Pair of victories over UConn. They do have 4 losses, though, the worst of which is to Nova, so I don't know what to make of that. In this game, we have a little bit of value on the Creighton side, and St. John's is playing at home. I'm not sure that's getting enough credit in this game. Honestly, it might not be, playing in Madison Square Garden. But Creighton is one of the few teams in the Big East that can stand up to St. John's on the glass. With Kalkbrenner on the inside, who never fouls, they have the lowest foul rate in the entire country. So, I mean, I think he's going to be out there the whole game as he always is. Rebounding should be close. It's 70-27. Yeah, the advantages are on St. John's side, but they're just so aggressive attacking the offensive glass. Creighton doesn't do that stylistically. They're awesome defensive rebounding. Height vastly favors Creighton. Shooting-wise, Creighton is infinitely better than St. John's, just not from 3. They need to score inside. That is a problem. It's Kalkbrenner versus Ejiofor. Ejiofor leads St. John's to the 9th-ranked interior defense. From 3, they're 98th, but again, that's not where Creighton excels. They're 156 in three-point percentage. That comes from Ashworth not shooting up to expectation largely. So it's a tough matchup for Creighton. And the turnovers are probably another factor to mention in this game. We talked about Ashworth's 10 turnovers in the first game, above 15 in both games. They're 254th in turnovers committed. This is a horrific number. St. John's is 12th in turnovers forced. This is a huge mismatch in this game, and it's even larger than a lot of other Big East matchups that St. John's has played. So that's my immediate concern. With St. John's, it's always, can they do enough in the periphery because they shoot the ball so poorly? 248th in effective field goal, 341st from 3. They don't shoot a lot of threes. They will get to the rim. Ejiofor is awesome, but Kalkbrenner provides elite rim protection. So scoring at the rim is much easier said than done against Creighton. That's the biggest matchup in the game. Mathematically, we do have a slight edge Creighton's direction. There are plenty of advantages for St. John's. They're the bigger team. They're more athletic. Ashworth is a midget at point guard. He turns the ball over incessantly. We'll see what happens. Leaning Creighton's direction, but we ended up playing St. John's late yesterday against Marquette, which was profitable, and was very happy to do so. I'm not sure there's a team on the level of St. John's in this conference at the moment. Duke and Louisville, this is a big injury game. Won't spend much time here. Louisville's Rain Smith didn't play yesterday again. I think they're just holding him out till the actual tournament. They lost Corin Johnson and Keyshawn Pryor way earlier this season. Duke's not going to have Cooper Flagg or Malik Brown. Just a really weird game for Duke yesterday. Really disappointing. They had a 20-point lead on North Carolina in the first half. Squander it, almost lose the game entirely. End up squeaking out a win barely, not covering the spread. So what do you get out of them? I mean, the whole expectation was This team has a lot of very talented players. They should be able to win games without Flagg and Brown. Everyone's a 5-star or a veteran or a high-level transfer that took a role decrease to play with this Duke team. And then in the first half, they looked like that. In the second half, they could not score a basket. I don't have the answer, but I mean, there's still concerns with Louisville as well, playing down a starter after they had so many injuries this year. To get here, Louisville beat Stanford on a buzzer beater from Hepburn. Then they beat Clemson yesterday by 3. Duke just knocked off North Carolina by 3, played an inept Georgia Tech team before that. So, I mean, it's very tough to evaluate these teams. What do we get? Duke's struggling without Flagg and his ability to handle the ball. Proctor's not actually like a true point guard for this team. Louisville, they're not the best shooting team. Hepburn's run hotter than the sun lately from 3. That extends into the finale in the regular season. On the year, they're 199th in three-point percentage. Even without Flagg, Duke is elite on defense. They're 48th defending the perimeter. And that's the thing with Duke that I hung my hat on yesterday. This team is elite with their size. Everyone is tall, even your bench players like Caleb Foster, who have to play more. So it's tough to score on this Duke team. The rim protection is awesome. And then with Louisville, they're smaller, but they're decent at rebounding, 42nd. Duke is 5th. They just don't shoot the ball quite as well. They trail behind defensively in most metrics. They're 168th in three-point defense, 80th on the interior. It's tough. In the first game, I guess I should mention it, it's just very different because they were at full strength. Duke won 67 or 76 to 65. They only shot 27% from 3 in that game. But Louisville was really bad at the rim. 40% of their shots went in there. Duke had one more rebound. Again, that's closer than people might think. Louisville had more than double Duke's turnovers. It was 15-7, so that's really what decided the game. But this is probably just going to be a sit back, maybe have it in the quad box. Definitely not a priority. Don't really care about the outcome in this game. You can tell it's sort of irrelevant to both teams as they're holding out studs for the actual tournament. So very hard to handicap. I think you could play Louisville on the basis that, all right, this team's better than North Carolina by a ton. Duke was a 7-point favorite against North Carolina and didn't cover it. That's really bad handicapping, so I'm not even going to recommend that. But if I was playing the game, that's where I'd go. This is the least likely game of the night to end up on the card. When that did end up on the card, a greasier one, South Carolina State takes on Norfolk State. This game has a 2.5-point spread, which we played in favor of South Carolina State. It's a 143 total. No major injuries in the game. This is a really bad conference. So to get here, South Carolina State beat Coppin State, who's the 3rd worst team in the country. And then they beat NC Central, crushed them to get here. Norfolk beat Maryland Eastern Shore, who's the 8th worst team in the country, and then Morgan State. These teams split the regular season. Both home teams won. Norfolk State won the first game in OT. It was ugly. Horrible shooting game. Tons of turnovers, tons of fouls. That's how you get to it was a tiny score, barely like 61-58 or something like that. I forget. Actually, I didn't write it down somehow. It was working fast this morning. Second game was way better. 91-88, South Carolina State won. Much better shooting game. Rebounding was even again. Norfolk State had 15 turnovers and 27 fouls. So that's really what was the deciding factor. But to keep some of these greasy games brief, Norfolk State is the much better offense. However, they're facing the much better defense. So it's strength on strength. South Carolina State can't shoot, but they're facing a horrible defense from Norfolk State. So weakness on weakness, who wins out? Overall, I think the shooting for South Carolina State has seen a little bit of regression. They're actually the better three-point shooting team. They're 176th at shooting threes, and the worst stat for Norfolk defensively is their three-point defense. They're 204th. So right away, there is a path for the offensive team that's worse. I think that is worth mentioning. However, there's a path on the other side, certainly, too. Norfolk State is 41st in interior scoring. That's where South Carolina State is bad. They're 237. So this part leads to weakness or strength on weakness. And that interior mismatch lines up with effective height. Norfolk State 81st, South Carolina State 183rd. Rebounding is actually closer than you might imagine. 125th for South Carolina State, 164th for Norfolk. And South Carolina State attacks the offensive glass, or 24th. Positively, Norfolk State is 336th in defensive rebounding, so you get a lot of second chance opportunities here. Both of these teams turn the ball over a ton. Both the defenses force a ton of turnovers. Both teams foul incessantly. Both defenses generate a ton of fouls. So this is a chance to be a really greasy game, as it was in the first. We make this mathematically inside the 2.5 and actually closer to a pick 'em. So I think you can play this pretty confidently for South Carolina State. This is one that I think makes a decent amount of sense here. Mountain West, a lot on the line. Boise State takes on Colorado State. This game is a pick 'em, and the total in the game sits at 139.5. No major injuries. Whoever wins this game obviously gets the auto bid. Whoever loses is fighting for their life in the at-large field. And I think there's a pretty decent chance they don't get in. But to get here, Boise State has already beaten 2 top 50 teams in the tournament. They beat San Diego State without Magungwa, and then they just knocked off New Mexico by 3 yesterday. Colorado State beat Nevada at 79 overall, not as impressive, and Utah State at 52. So yeah, good body of work, but not as impressive for sure. In the tournament specifically. In the regular season, both these teams have good body of works. For the most part, some blips on the radar, which put them on the bubble. Colorado State won both 75-72 at home and then 83-73 on the road. Boise State did shoot well from inside, but horrible from 3, kind of in both games. Colorado State was the exact opposite, and that makes sense. We'll talk about their stylistics. In game 2, Colorado State had more success inside. Rebounding was close in both games. And to me, Boise's just a limited team. This team can't shoot, so they're reliant on getting to the rim. They take a ton of threes, and they're 301st in three-point percentage. Colorado State's defense is not great defending the 3. They're 178th. But man, this is just a lot of self-inflicted wounds from Boise. On the inside, Colorado State is shorter, 274. Boise is 181st, but rebounding is actually close. Colorado State is 55th. Boise State 8th. And Colorado State just does not attack the offensive boards. They don't need to. They shoot the ball really well. 73rd in three-point percentage, 21st in two-point percentage. Boise State's defense definitely lags behind Colorado State, even though total defensive efficiency would tell you otherwise. Basically, turnovers help a little bit there. Boise's 107th in interior defense, 168th from 3. There's more ways for Colorado State to win. Colorado State kind of has the star power as well, if you want to call it that. I mean, the national media will tell you Nick Clifford is the underrated player of the year. It has burst on the scene. If you've been watching college basketball for any point in time, you know that Nick Clifford was a failure at Colorado and was not good enough to play in the Pac-12, so he had to transfer down to the Mountain West and has finally experienced success as a 28-year-old. He's having a great year. It is what it is. But, I mean, let's not act like Nick Clifford is some guy that burst on the scene this year. Nick Clifford has been a defensive specialist largely through his career and has now experienced success at a lower level of competition. It is what it is. Just evaluate what it is. I'm sorry. Yeah, he's awesome at this level of competition, though. The fact of the matter is he's probably the best player in the entire game. And Colorado State is the better offensive team. They have some defensive advantages, and they neutralize the opponent on the glass for the most part, Boise State that is, despite being shorter. Boise State's been hotter than the absolute sun recently, and they've been taking money in the betting markets. The only reason I haven't played this now is I am guessing Boise State's going to take some money early in the morning today, and we'll see if they do. I'm going to check this right now. Still a pick 'em. We'll wait and see. I'm hoping to get Colorado State at plus money, but I'm not sure that's going to come. I hope it does. Miami, Ohio, and Akron for the MAC championship. We did take this one. Akron minus the 5.5. We make this closer to 7. Akron has kind of just been running this conference, and I don't see any reason why this really changes. The game is healthy. There's no major injuries. Miami, Ohio beat Eastern Michigan and Kent State to get here. Akron beat Bowling Green and Toledo. They just scored 100 points yesterday. In the regular season, Akron beat Miami, Ohio 102-75. They just crushed them shooting-wise, rebounded them 41-24. It's just a big mismatch, and I think most of the efficiency metrics will point to that as well. Miami, Ohio can shoot the ball. They're actually 33rd in effective field goal percentage. Akron's 35th. Both teams shoot the ball well from 3. But the difference is, while defensive metrics look pretty close, Akron actually is 40th in three-point defense. Miami, Ohio is 178th. So with two teams that shoot a ton of threes and shoot them well, one team defends it well, one team doesn't. On the inside, Akron's also better scoring there despite being the smaller team. More on that in a second. And interior defense, Miami, Ohio is 237th. Akron's 156th. So both offensive defensive matchups favor Akron. The reason you get Miami, Ohio a little bit closer is they do force the 63rd most turnovers in the country. Akron is decent at taking care of the ball, not good, not great. But interestingly, probably the weirdest stat in the whole game, Miami, Ohio is 126th in effective height. Akron's 364th. Akron's 75th at rebounding. Miami, Ohio's 206th. This is one of those that doesn't make a lot of sense, comes down to coaching and effort. But man, that does not make sense for as short as Akron is. This is one of the smallest teams in the entire country. The smallest team. They're dead last in effective height. Anyway, great team that plays well. This team nearly went undefeated in the regular season in the MAC. Just an elite body of work. We'll play Akron minus the 5.5. A couple awesome games to finish out that I do plan on taking a little later in the day. UC Irvine takes on San Diego State. Not San Diego State. UC Irvine takes on UC San Diego. Two teams that are also sweating this game hard. The auto bid is really important. And whoever loses is certainly in the at-large picture. We'll see if they've done enough, but I think they probably have. No major injuries in this game. UC Irvine beat Cal Poly, who was red hot to get here, and UC San Diego knocked off Santa Barbara, another decent team. These teams split the regular season. The road team won both times. Irvine took the first game 60-52. San Diego State only shot 17% from three. UC San Diego, I keep calling them San Diego State. UC San Diego shot 17% from three. Irvine won on the glass 45-34. They forced 19 fouls, so they get the win. UC San Diego took the second game 85-67 in a blowout. They were way better shooting the ball this game. Still got out-rebounded, but they did force 18 turnovers. They only had 12 themselves. So stylistically, how do these teams line up? What we see in the efficiency metrics actually played on the court? Rebounding-wise, I think it did. Rebounding-wise, UC Irvine is 80th in height, 48th in rebounding. UC San Diego, 325th in height, 233rd in rebounding. Just a big advantage for Irvine. They took it in both games. Shooting-wise, UC San Diego is much better. 32nd in effective field goal, 43rd from three. UC Irvine, they're 138th in effective field goal. They are 103rd from three. They're not horrible there. They just can't score inside. They've been really inefficient, which is weird considering how tall they are. So I almost think that they might be better than the stats indicate. Anyway, defensively, Irvine is better than San Diego. They're third in interior defense. UC San Diego's 25th in interior defense. Again, that's not where Irvine scores a ton. From three, Irvine is 130th. San Diego is 193rd. So there are paths from three for both of these teams to score and have success. Turnover-wise, this is a massive advantage in favor of UC San Diego. This team is up there with Marquette and St. John's in turnover margin. Sixth in turnovers committed, UC Irvine is 254th. Turnovers forced, UC San Diego second, UC Irvine 123rd. Foul margin is the exact opposite. It actually favors UC Irvine quite a bit, and that was a problem in the first game. So across the board, there are pretty clear advantages both directions, but that's just it. There's some on both sides. We make this inside the 5.5. The current spread for us, we have this UC San Diego at 69.2, Irvine at 65.1. That's about -4. I likely will play the Irvine side, but San Diego was taking money early in the day, and I think there is some incentive to waiting and seeing where this goes throughout the day. One we will wait and see. Closing it out, Grand Canyon takes on Utah Valley. I think these are the two best teams in this conference, so it should be an epic showdown. 4-point spread in favor of Grand Canyon. The Lopes, 142 total, no major injuries. Grand Canyon has had a disappointing year. They just beat Arlington and Cal Baptist to get here. Utah Valley beat Utah Tech and Seattle. These teams split the regular season. The home team won both. Utah Valley took the first game 72-64. It was a poor shooting game from both teams. But they did out-rebound Grand Canyon 45-37, also forced 14 turnovers and 20 fouls, so they won on the margins. Grand Canyon took the second game 75-57, another poor shooting effort, particularly bad for Utah Valley. But Grand Canyon righted the ship, and they won on the glass in this game 42-33. Overall, resume-wise, Utah Valley has had pretty good body of work. They're 8-6 against the top 200. Best win is against Grand Canyon. Only one loss outside the top 200. Grand Canyon's similar. They're 10-5 against the top 200. Their best win is over 82 Stanford. 2 losses outside the top 200 for them to UC Davis and Abilene Christian. Efficiency-wise, Grand Canyon has most of the advantages in this game. They're close. These teams are almost identical in height. Rebounding is close between them. Grand Canyon at 46th, Utah Valley at 81st. Effective shooting is pretty close too. Grand Canyon 163, Utah Valley 188. Inside, Utah Valley a little bit worse again, 162, Grand Canyon 114. 3, Utah Valley has the slight advantage, 231 to 284, but neither team shoots threes. They're both outside the top 300 in three-point rate, so that's at least worth mentioning. Both teams definitely preferring to score inside and get to the rim. Defensively, Grand Canyon 47, Utah Valley 85th. However, the interior defense favors Utah Valley by a wide margin. They're 11th, Grand Canyon's 31st. Now, it's actually not that wide, but it is wide enough. Turnover margin appears to be about equal, but not the way you might think. Grand Canyon forces a ton of turnovers, but they turn it over a ton themselves. Utah Valley is basically middle of the pack in both turnovers committed and turnovers forced. Foul margin's almost identical for these teams too. So you get a lot of, these teams look really comparable. Grand Canyon has slight edges in every single metric or a lot of the metrics. What does this mean for the spread? Grand Canyon has played way below expectation this year. So intuitively, I'm looking at this game. I'm like, how does Grand Canyon not cover this 4 points because of the players they actually have on their roster? I mean, this team, Tyon Grant Foster, a lot of people were talking about him for the NBA. Ray Harrison, he's an elite player that's been with this team for a while. You have high major transfers that came down in Jacoby Coles and Lockware, whatever you think of him. I don't think particularly that much. But you compare that to the Utah Valley roster, and it's just like, all right, who on Utah Valley is going to play at any sort of the next level? No one. But at the end of the day, the efficiency metrics do suggest Utah Valley is the value in the spread. We make this about 2.5. I'm going to play Utah Valley. It's just Grand Canyon's taking money, so they probably should. Hoping to get like a 4.5 or a 5 before this actually ticks off. It's a late night game, so we'll have time to figure out and see. That'll do it for us today. Not as many games, just don't have as much time to actually dive into the weeds, but hopefully we'll play some more throughout the day in Discord. Thank you for watching. We'll see you guys tomorrow for the finale of the regular season in Champ Week before we get to the tournament. Good luck.